Welcome to this meeting of Babergh District Council Cabinet. I'm Councillor John Ward, Acting Leader of Babergh District Council, and I'll be chairing this meeting. We have a somewhat depleted Cabinet today due to a number of illnesses and other things, so however, we will continue. May I first of all remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use, that you do not interrupt other speakers, that if you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure your mobile phones are on silent or switched off. And additionally, we will be using e-voting for this meeting on the modern.gov app. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. I'll now move to the agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Sally Davies, Councillor Alistair McCraw, Councillor Dave Busby and Councillor Daniel Potter.
Thank you. Item 2, to receive declarations of pecuniary, other registrable or non-registrable interest by members. Are there any to declare? Nope. And in accordance with the delegated authority, the monitoring officer has granted dispensations to all members in respect of the 2024 to 25 budget papers. Item 3, paper BCA 2338, to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of January 2024. I'll just go through these, starting at page 5 on your agenda pack. Excuse me, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, and finally page 14. So if there are no points regarding the accuracy of the minutes, may I have a proposer, please? Councillor Saw, and a seconder, Councillor Derek Davis. So we'll now conduct the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress.
Thank you.
Councillor Saul, may I take your vote verbally? Councillor Davies, may I take your vote verbally? Thank you, Chair. That's 4 votes for and 1 abstention. That's carried.
Thank you. Right. Moving on. Item 4, to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received, Chair.
Item 5, questions by councillors.
None received, Chair.
Item 6, matters referred by the Overview and Scrutiny or Joint Audit and Standards Committees.
There are no matters referred, Chair.
Okay, moving on, Cabinet members. Item 7, the forthcoming decisions list. Does anyone have any comments over the contents of that? No. Right, okay. Next is item 7, paper BCA 2339, the General Fund Budget for 2024 to 25 and 4-year outlook. I will now, as the Cabinet Member for Finance, Assets and Investments, introduce this report. I'm pleased to introduce report BCA 2339 for the 2024 to 25 General Fund Budget and 4-year outlook. In addition to the main report, there is also a tabled paper which contains some important updates, and I'll hopefully ensure that I'm clear when I talk about each of them. We have to set a balanced budget, but the budget presented in this report currently shows a gap, and this is, I'm referring to the main paper, between forecast expenditure and income of £846,000, although the table paper has updated this and reduced that number. The table paper also has final estimates for several budget items that are not in the main report: financing costs, costs arising from likely regulatory changes in accounting for loan impairments, and the final finance settlement from central government. And lastly, the table paper includes some options that we need to consider and agree today for recommendation to Council. In the past, we have used the worst case scenario when putting budget proposals together, which has often resulted in underspends, which have had unintended consequences for the budget setting process. For the current year, stretching but realistic assumptions were used setting the budget, and that was done last February. However, global events, rising inflation and rising interest rates, coupled with reduced demand for planning services, have seen a marked deterioration in the Council's finances throughout the current financial year, which will end in a forecast deficit, or at least at Q2 a forecast deficit of £922,000 against an original budgeted surplus of £22,000. A summary of the 2023 to 24 budget forecasts are provided in paragraphs 4.5 to 4.8 of the report. However, this is a moving picture, and Q3 is going to show a slight improvement on that. The national economic position is summarised in paragraph 4.4. The impacts on us are threefold. Firstly, inflationary pressures for items such as energy, fuel and utilities, alongside inflation-linked contractual cost increases, and also the need to agree a fair and affordable pay offer for staff. Secondly, the high interest rates have meant that our financing costs, particularly in obtaining short-term loans, have increased significantly. And thirdly, no major changes to departmental spending plans have meant that the finance settlement, despite the recently announced increase, is a below-inflation increase. Again, it is only a one-year settlement. The government has been very vocal in saying that councils, and I quote, will see on average, an above-inflation increase of 7% in their core spending power next year. And that includes a funding guarantee of 4% before taking into account increases in council tax or any other locally generated income. Yes, inflation is now 4.6%, but it has been much higher than 7%, only falling below that in July. And we will be feeling the consequences well into the future. And this funding guarantee masks a significant decrease in the services grant. The government continues to say that council tax referendum thresholds are neither minimum amounts nor caps, and that, and again I quote, it is for individual local authorities to determine whether to use the flexibilities, taking into consideration the pressures many households are facing. This is rather disingenuous because the promised 7% increase in core spending power assumes that we will increase council tax up to the referendum limit. The government has also asked local authorities to use their reserves to maintain services. Well, we will be doing that, and I will talk about that later, but it's not a long-term strategy. Reserves can only be used once. Moving on to the details of the budget. First, I want to run through the key points in the main report. The 2024 budget has taken the 2023 to 24 forecast position as a starting point, but with a number of budget items, the employees' budget, grant income from central government, financing costs, interest income, and business rates and council tax income being forecast from a zero base. A lot of work has gone into identifying efficiencies, savings and income opportunities to balance the budget, but at the moment more needs to be done to achieve this and strengthen the short-term financial resilience of the Council. The budget summary is provided in Table 1 in paragraph 5.4 and the charts in paragraph 5.5. Gross expenditure is £25.4 million and income is £10.5 million, giving a net cost of service of £14.9 million. Funding totals £14.07 million, leaving a current forecast budget gap, as stated in that report, of £846,000. And you'll see from the table that the net cost of service has increased by 19%. This net cost includes the changes to fees and charges agreed by Cabinet last month. And these also include those set by government, which we can't control, and those over which we do have control and for which we have adopted a policy of full cost recovery. We are forecasting a small decrease in sales fees and charges income compared with the current year's budget due to the ongoing downturn in planning fee income, only partly mitigated by the planning fee increases that the government has recently announced. Table 2 in paragraph 5.6 shows the 2024 to 25 budget pressures and savings compared with the current year, with the key assumptions described in paragraphs 5.7 to 5.13. There are new cost pressures of just over £4 million, identified savings of £1.7 million, and an increase in funding of £1.5 million, plus last year's budget surplus, leading to the overall stated deficit in that table of £846,000. In terms of the funding settlement and new homes bonus, details of the funding settlement are provided in paragraphs 5.14 to 5.18. The council's the council's 2024 to 25 grant allocation, including new homes bonus, has increased by £149,000, which is 11% compared with 2023 to 24. And it's £103 more than the original £46,200 stated in paragraph 515 of the main report as a result of the recently announced finance settlement. £85,300 of this funding is due to an increase in new homes bonus, resulting from our increased housing delivery. Without this, the final funding numbers are less generous than they seem, turning around a provisional decrease into a £63,900 increase. We will again be using all of the new homes bonus allocation to balance the budget. Information about new homes bonus payments over the years are provided in paragraphs 519 to 5.22. In terms of council tax, core to our funding is the need to have a strong council tax base, and so the numbers produce a compelling case for the need for council tax increases at the referendum threshold of 2.99% each year. This means a rise of £5.46 to £188.10 per annum, or £3.62 a week for a Band D property. We also agreed last month to impose an empty homes premium after 1 year instead of 2 years. These measures will provide an additional £352,000 of council tax funding after taking into account revised income bands and contribution rates for the local council tax reduction scheme, which are shown in Table 5 in paragraph 5.27. We are forecasting a total of £5.9 million funding from business rates. Although the baseline rates amount after tariff and levy is almost the same as the current year, and the pooling share has decreased, we have had some quite large increases, including the fact that we won't be top slicing the business rates growth to the Suffolk Public Sector Leaders Group, so that gives us an extra £300,000. There's also been a significant increase in Section 31 grant, due largely to the continuing freeze of the small business rate multiplier. And we've also got now a large prior year business rate surplus because we're able to reduce the provision for the impact of successful appeals, and a detailed explanation of this can be found in paragraph 5.28. I'd now like to draw your attention to the table paper. You'll see from the amended budget position in Table 3 in paragraph 5.1 that we now have more or less closed the gap since the Overview and Scrutiny Committee's report last month, and also the recently published Cabinet report. And we have had to do this. There has been a huge amount of work put into this, and we have been fortunate in that there are some large one-off payments, movements in a number of budget items there. In addition to the Section 31 business rates and prior year business rate surplus I've mentioned, we've also got additional SIFCO income as a result of cancelling further deferred debt repayments from SIFCO. And there's also been a large credit in terms of the HRA's share of short-term borrowing interest costs, and that's been credited to the general fund because those costs are credited to now charged to the HRA. And paragraph 3.3 explains this in more detail and replaces paragraph 5.13 in the main report. However, there are some significant additional pressures that are not included. Table 1 in paragraph 4.1 shows that we still need to fund a budget pressure of just under £1.9 million. The table shows how this number is derived and the resources that can be made available. I want now to explain what this table is saying. Now, firstly, the expected deficit for the current year at quarter 3 is an improvement on quarter 2, which I mentioned earlier. The latest deficit for 2024 to 25 is in the main report, and the general fund credit for HRA borrowing is also included there. And there are also 2 items relating to an ECL reserve that needs further explanation. The government is getting tougher on third-party loans, and the expectation is that it will reduce MRP, minimum revenue provision, on such loans within the next 12 months. Our Treasury Management advisors have calculated an expected credit loss to measure the credit risk of these loans, and we need to account for this in the budget. This affects our two third-party loans, Suffolk and Babergh, and the amounts are shown in that table. And more information is provided in paragraphs 3.5 to 3.12. We will be setting up an ECL reserve to be able to cover these, as we expect to have to include them by the time the 2024 to 25 outturn is produced. The net result of all this is that we need to find £1.9 million. The rest of the table shows what is proposed to address this shortfall and protect us from unexpected future budget shortfalls. Firstly, a number of earmarked reserves will be repurposed to the ECL reserve and also a new financial resilience reserve to provide short-term funding of budget gaps. This will have an impact as stated in the table. Secondly, some capital projects will be reprofiled to save interest payments of £173,000, and this is also included in Table 1. The details for both of these proposals are shown in Table 2. Just a quick comment about the reserves. The latest position for the earmarked reserves is shown in Table 5 of the tabled paper. It includes the proposed repurposed reserves. I want to draw your attention to paragraph 4.5 regarding the General Fund unearmarked reserve, which is £1 million. The proposed financial resilience reserve is a prudent measure at this point to ensure that we are able to meet any in-year deficits or overspending in 2024 to 25 and beyond. Moving on to the medium-term view, the forecasts for the funding, pressures and savings and income for the next 4 years are provided in section 7 of the main report. But this is out of date and it will be updated for the council meeting, because unfortunately there hasn't been time to do this for today. Any medium-term forecast would have to be treated with caution, however, due to increasing uncertainties on costs and funding. We do know that we are likely to be looking at a cumulative budget gap of between £2 and £3 million over the next 3 to 4 years. The measures we are taking are described in section 8 of the main report. The review, remodel, reinvent approach is well established, but I think there will be changes. And I think it's fair to say, I'm looking at the Chief Executive now, that he's already indicated that the remodel will be given greater emphasis. The measures will ensure that we will be able to meet any challenges in 2024 to 25, and they will give us time to look at options to ensure future years' spending is able to be balanced by available resources. The revised capital programme is shown in Table 6 of the table paper, and it includes £6.8 million of reprofiled capital projects listed in Table 2. The planned spend for 2024 to 25 is now £9 million, down from £15.8 million. So in summary, a lot of work has gone into balancing the budget in the short term, but this has required repurposing reserves, so reducing what can be used elsewhere. This use of reserves, as I said, can only be done once. The remaining earmarked reserves really must remain committed for funding the purpose for which they were originally established. There still remains the problem of the medium-term forecast, and work will start in the spring to continue to make efficiencies and productivity savings and find new ways of working. I'm confident that we will recognise that we do recognise the situation and will be able to make the necessary decisions. And finally, to remind you, as part of the debate, I want you to confirm that you agree with the reserve and capital programme changes proposed in Table 2 of the table paper. I'd like, therefore, to propose the recommendations in paragraphs 3.1 to 3.4 of the main report and paragraph 2.1 of the tabled report, and ask for a seconder. May I have a seconder? Councillor Helen Davis, thank you. Right, members of the Cabinet, any questions? It's a lot to take in, and in fact we do have the two papers, one that does substantially replace sections of the other, is difficult at this stage, but it was the only way of getting the information to us in time. By the time we get to the council meeting, it'll all be consolidated in a one final paper. Councillor Derek Davis.
Yeah, so on that point, there's still a lot of imponderables in there, so how confident are you that the officers are going to be able to get all the information that's needed? Because as you say, it's a very difficult budget. Well, they always are, but this is even more challenging. And there's still a lot of outgoings that we're not 100% aware of. For example, Babergh growth, the issues around that.
Well, the specifics around those ECL numbers for Babergh growth and SIFCO, obviously the detail is not known, the timing is not known, which is why we're setting aside provisions that our Treasury advisors have suggested we should make in that reserve, so that when the time comes at some point during the year, we will be able to draw on that reserve. But at the moment, I don't think there's anything more that I can say about that at this stage. But we are making, by setting up that reserve, we're making sure that we can handle that if and when it hits us.
I noticed in the earmarked reserves that the 80,000 that was going to be paid towards Freeport in mid-Suffolk, is that now dead? We're not going to give them any more money, even going forward?
Yeah, that item, if I just get, maybe Karen could perhaps confirm, but that item should be taken out of the reserve, shouldn't it?
That is correct, Chair.
Yeah.
My understanding is that was actually put into the reserves in error,
yeah.
and that Babergh did not have that, did not need to make that payment.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Saul.
Yes, Chair. First of all, I totally support the idea of a financial resilience reserve. That's very prudent. Obviously, I'm sure that the issue that worries all Cabinet members is how we are going to, if at all, replenish our reserves going forward. And obviously, it doesn't help to produce a medium-term strategy when it looks like government settlements will always be 1 year.
In terms of reserve replenishment, that is something that has got to be addressed as part of the work that we embark on after the budget has been approved by Council. We are drawing heavily at the moment, but yes, we do need to make sure not just that we've closed the forecast gap over the medium term, but also have sufficient funds to replenish reserves. In terms of government settlements, they have been 1 year settlements for quite some time now. I don't think anyone can say anything more about that, because we have no idea who will be the government in a year's time and what their policy will be towards local government funding. Councillor Saul.
I recall that when the County Council announced its budget, that there were certain of their obligations, particularly as regarding homelessness, that they wished to transfer to the districts. Do we have any more indication of the size of that quantum and what it might, the impact might be on us?
It was more the case that they wanted to no longer meet their commitment or earlier commitments to that. It wasn't so much transferring to the districts, but it was a recognition by the districts and boroughs that we would have to there would be some impact on us, and we would have to pick up some of the pieces perhaps arising from that decision. There's been a lot of work and discussions to and fro between the directors of housing amongst the districts and boroughs in the county to try to work out and quantify the impact. That's not, I don't think there's a final understanding yet, apart from the fact that there clearly will be, and there will be a cost. But I can't say anything more than that at the moment. Again, Karen, do you have any further comment on that? Or Deborah, perhaps? You might.
Thank you, Chair. Only to say that there are ongoing discussions, and in fact there's a meeting next week to discuss the impact with housing with councils and with county. So we'll update you when we have any definitive news on that.
Thank you. Any other questions? In which case, Councillor Saul. Yeah, no, go ahead.
Apologies. Obviously, looking at the medium term, we recognise that for some time we've been talking about a new depot for our waste operations, and of course, within the medium term, the government will be mandating their new waste strategy. Now, obviously, we would hope that the government would be pragmatic with their new burden funding, but have we made provision for both of those, but both for the depot and the changes that are coming in as regards waste and recycling, because whatever government is in power, it doesn't look to me like we are going to get a generous settlement and new burden funding.
In terms of the depot, we've still got that in the capital programme. There's that commitment for that, and we do need to progress with that, because that is something we simply have to do. We can't postpone that. In terms of new burdens funding for implementing the measures that are contained within rules, the resources and waste strategy, it does seem, from the latest I've heard, that we're definitely going to get full capital new burdens funding for capital expenditure, but it does seem to be some uncertainty over revenue expenditure. At the moment, we're not forecasting anything in the medium term in terms of any potential impact from rules, but that's clearly something we have to look at in detail again during the course of the year. Any questions? More questions? If not, oh, Councillor Helen Davis.
Oh, it's come on. Excellent. Just with respect to the income we receive from council tax, if we're putting the council tax up, presumably that means a certain number of residents will then find themselves unable to pay. Have we calculated what we expect to happen as a result of that increase in the council tax per se? Because you might just put it up by 2.99% and think you're going to get X in, but you actually only get Y in because people suddenly put up their hand and say, sorry.
I'll ask Karen to answer that, but before I do, I think the working age council tax reduction scheme probably mitigates a lot of that as much as it can, but whether as a result of changes to the thresholds for that take people out of that scheme and make them more and then they have to be themselves have to pay more council tax as a result of no longer qualifying. I don't know. Karen, do you have any further comment on that?
Sorry, Chair, I'm not in possession of that detailed knowledge. We'd have to investigate and get a written response back, probably from the Revenues Partnership.
Certainly, thanks, Karen. Yeah, it would be one to get detail from the SRP, but we do have very high council tax collection rates. So I think past years' experience has shown that it's probably not a significant issue. Councillor Carter.
Sorry, it wasn't a question, but just to come back on that, I think that council tax is probably up there on the list of things for people to pay.
Sorry,
Due
can
to
you
what
please
will happen.
Close to the mic.
Sorry. Due to what will happen if you won't pay it. And there are schemes in place to be able to help people. But we're not actively sort of searching those people out. People have to come forward. So I suppose it's just the knowledge to say, if you are struggling, get in touch. We might be able to help you. But generally, rent and council tax are what people will go. They'll go without other things to be able to pay those. Unfortunately, it's a hard time for everyone.
If there are no further questions from the Councillor Saul.
It would seem that one of the unintended consequences of this is that as a council, we are trying to preserve the services that we, the discretionary services and the statutory services that we offer our residents. I know that we have had conversations about different ways of addressing the need of our residents and maybe transforming the way we offer services. And I would presume that this work will go on once this budget is finalised, that we will have to do more of this work to ensure that we can balance the budget in future years, whilst still maintaining the level of service that we offer our residents. Am I right in assuming that is what we're trying to do?
I think so. I think that's, I'll let the Chief Exec come in a sec, but I think in terms of the aspiration of the administration, that is what we want to do. Arthur.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, absolutely. So that work has begun already, rather than waiting until the Council finally approves the budget. But the intention is very much that whilst this budget is being balanced through extensive use of reserves, that is not something that can be sustained on a long-term basis, nor is it sensible financial management on a long-term basis. And so the intention would be, both in the following year, or this forthcoming year, that wherever possible, whilst we have set a budget that relies upon the use of those reserves, that in reality we do not end up spending those reserves and instead build savings in that means that your end-of-year position has relied less on reserves. I don't think I could hand on heart say that you're going to have no spend from reserves in the course of the financial year, but certainly would want to rewind that as best possible. So you're setting a, if you like, setting a technical balanced budget and hope to improve that position during the course of the year. But fundamentally, Councillor Saw, you are right, which is we cannot, as Babergh, continue to do things in the way that we have in the past. And that will mean extremely difficult decisions, which is either we do less, which nobody politically, I suspect, will want to sign up to, but nonetheless is the harsh reality of the way this council is funded, or rather not funded, but also that we fundamentally relook at how things are delivered, which might be more in terms of enabling services rather than direct delivery, working more closely with our communities, working more closely with partners, and therefore delivering things in a fundamentally different way. So the outcomes are still achieved, but they aren't achieved by the council directly doing it for people. But clearly that transition is not a simple thing to do, and nor are we alone, unfortunately, because lots of councils are in this very similar situation. So we will be able to lean on the wider local government network for support in terms of looking at how others are doing things. But I don't think it's realistic, nor can I promise you, that there won't be some very difficult decisions for the politicians to have to make in terms of prioritising elements of services rather than actual full services, but elements of services over other things. And it will have consequences for residents as a result.
Thank you.
Any further Cabinet questions before I move on to other members? In which case, other members, Councillor McLaren, do you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. I
if we look at the chart on page 20 of the papers, what sort of struck me was that the expenditure for 23-24, the senior leadership team actually spent more money than the Directorate of Communities and Wellbeing. And I wondered perhaps why that was. Then we go on to page 23 where we've got the expectation of 24-25, and just looking again at those two areas, those specific areas, then there's a very dramatic difference, and I wondered if somebody could explain that to me, or if that's not possible today, if somebody could let me know. I would be very interested to know how those figures were arrived at. Thank you.
I will ask if the Chief Executive, do you have a comment on those differences at the moment, or is that something we have to get back?
I can give you an initial observation. I think you were looking at chart 1, where you, Councillor McLaren. Yes, so as you'll appreciate, we have a very small communities and wellbeing team, I think is the answer to that question. So whilst we do what we do in relation to communities and wellbeing, it's not a statutory service. It's something that's grown over time, and kind of refer back to my previous comments as to whether or not we can sustain that at that level. But certainly we do not have a significant number of staff working in that area. In terms of the senior leadership team, I'm currently making or proposing changes to the senior leadership team which will bring those costs down.
I think the differences between the two charts is that the communities and wellbeing had increased significantly, where the SLT had increased but only slightly, but community, and I don't know, Tom, do you have comment on that? In terms of the communities, the increase from the current year to the future year is gone up from 0.735 million to 1.3 million. So that's almost, well, it's about a 90% increase.
Through you, Chair, I'll need to take that away and provide a detailed answer outside the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
To do that.
Councillor McLaren.
Can I just follow that up with the Chief Executive again?
Okay.
Can you just, in terms of directorates, then the directorate themselves, that cost does not come in with the directorate expense, is that true?
Yes, so the way in which you've got this presented here shows the cost of the director sitting with the senior leadership team rather than sitting within the directorate. Yes.
I think for anybody outside looking at that, that could be a bit confusing. Thank you.
I'm more than happy, Chair, if we want to not show any cost of senior leadership team and absorb it into each directorate, but I suspect there would be a question as to where's the transparency around that as well. But yes, you're absolutely right to flag. That's how that's presented in the papers.
Any further questions? No. Okay, members of the Cabinet, we're through to debate now. Does anyone wish to make any comments? Councillor Derek Davis.
Yeah, as we've said before, it is a very difficult budget, and we are going to still have to make some tough choices going forward. As has been pointed out, we can't carry on the way we have been carried on, and we've already made a start in terms of full cost recovery or towards full cost recovery for a lot of our services, which are statutory, and those other ones that are not. And I hate to say it, but car parking charges has to be included in that, not just for this year, but for the years going forward as well. What I am pleased, though, to pick up Councillor Davies' point, is that we have looked at things like council tax charges and the income band support, which totally backs up Councillor Carter's point in that we are looking after our residents for those that are finding the cost of living crisis difficult. And this budget has balanced that by making sure that we look after the most vulnerable residents in the district. I think we've still got a lot of work to do. As Councillor Source pointed out, we need to replenish the reserves at some point because, you know, it's going to rain again, and we need to make sure that we're robust enough to deal with that. But I think this is it's a good start, and I think the officers and yourself, Councillor Ward, that have been involved in putting this together have done a very, very good job in very difficult circumstances. And I think as a cabinet we should support it.
Thank you. Councillor Saw.
So referring back to the communities and well-being, I think one of the striking factors in the increase in expenditure is obviously the work that the council does in helping residents deal with the cost of living crisis. I was talking to the chair of Sudbury Citizens Advice quite recently, and they have a piece of research that shows that there are over 7,000 individuals in the district who are not necessarily in receipt of benefit but are income deprived, i.e. their salaries, their wages do not cover their outgoings. And the communities team have been very successful in getting funding from other organisations, and is in fact kind of a good exemplar of the partnership model, because I think the Integrated Health Board would find it quite difficult to actually offer services without the help of the district council. So I think whereas we obviously should look at that expenditure, we should also be conscious that this team its scope of work has increased exponentially over the last couple of years. And given the cuts that there are in both at the county level, it is a very difficult set of circumstances to try and to work round, because we want to help people, but we also have to be conscious of the costs of that. But I would say that the communities team are very adept in securing grants from other organisations, and I think that's something that we will definitely, as a council, be spending more time ensuring that we can get grants from other places, if grants there be.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to say anything? Oh, Tom, sorry.
It's just if I can add into the debate, just to flag that Chart 1 and Chart 3 are not actually directly comparable, and this picks up the point that Councillor Saul was making, and that Chart 3 is the gross expenditure, and so it is a more significant amount because the community team are spending money that isn't the council's. They're spending money that has been gained from external grants or from other partners such as health. I will still provide you with a detailed breakdown to address your question, but ultimately a significant part of that difference is that one is gross and the other isn't.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor Carter.
Risk of repeating what's already been said. It is difficult. It's an awful position to be in. At the moment, we're not as bad as some other councils. But to use the reserves, I suppose, to cover our back now, or try not to, but to use the reserves to cover our back now, and then looking forward to not only replace those, but to carry on services or increase help to others, it is concerning and it is difficult. But I think that transparency and communication with our residents is key throughout this whole process, to let them know what's going on, and to say we're not, no one wants to cut anything, no one wants to raise council tax, but these things have to be done so that we don't fall into a position where we can't do anything. It's an awful position to be in, but I think we've done well with what is here, but looking forward, we need to think of something, and just talk to people and make them aware and say this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it.
Thank you. And it's not just a question of trying to avoid cuts, but there's certain aspirations that we've agreed we want to try to do over the next 3 to 4 years, and it's being able to have the funding to achieve those aspirations, and that's the really important thing. In terms of communication, you're absolutely right. We do need to constantly get out there and explain and as much as possible to as wide an audience as possible, because there are those out there who are spreading disinformation, and we do need to counter that. Okay, anything else, anyone? Or shall we move to, first of all, just in terms of the suggestions, the recommendations in the table paper with regard to the reserve movements and the capital programme repurposing and reprofiling to later years, are we happy with that? Because that's going to form key to the report when it goes to council in terms of the decisions we have to make. So are we happy with what's suggested there, particularly on the capital programme? There are significant items that are being repurposed as explained in the table paper, but the amount in terms of interest payment savings, 173,000, doesn't sound a lot, but it is still a significant and useful contribution. There are a number. Obviously, nobody wants to postpone any of those in an ideal world, but these are the ones that perhaps can be postponed with the least impact in terms of some of the others. Councillor Derek Davis.
Yeah, broadly I'm very supportive, but I would just caution about throwing good money after bad in some cases. But also looking on the positive side, we've got a lot of good things coming up, and I know using my economics team for growth and regeneration as an example, they're working on a number of ways of increasing revenue to the district, skills-wise, investment-wise, bringing more energy and more economy to the district. So I think that's really good. And I think in terms of the capital programme, as long as we invest wisely, then it's money well spent. But we need to be cautious that we back the right horses, if you like, on that one. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Okay.
But it's broadly supportive. Yeah.
Right. And I assume if nobody says no, then you're all in favour. In which case, if there's nothing else that anyone wishes to say, we can move to the vote. Okay?
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That's 5 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Right, moving on then. So item 9, paper BCA 2340, the Housing Revenue Account 2024 to 25 budget. And so, again, as the Cabinet Member for Finance, Assets and Investments, it falls upon me to introduce this report. I'm pleased to introduce report BCA 2340 for the 2024 to 25 Housing Revenue Account Revenue and Capital Budgets. As with the General Fund, the situation with the HRA is increasingly challenging. The same inflationary pressures are having a huge impact, and we are suffering the after effects of the rent policy of 2015 to 2020 and also last year's rent cap. We are undertaking a full review of our HRA 30-year business plan so that it still meets the Council's aspirations, our tenants' aspirations, and the need to invest in our ageing stock for repairs and energy efficiency improvements, while also ensuring we adhere to the social housing regulations and the requirements of the social housing regulator. Our budget for 2023 to 24 forecasts a deficit of £602,000, which has increased by £944,000 to just over 1.5 million at course 2. As we know, the key factors affecting this are the additional costs incurred to address the repairs backlog, as well as increasing materials costs. Cabinet approved the use of reserves to cover this total deficit. We would have forecast a surplus of £343,000 for 2024 to 25. However, due to a review of the best use of reserves, we are proposing to make a £6 million loan repayment and a £4.5 million increase in revenue contribution to capital. These two one-off measures result in a position for next year appearing to have worsened to a deficit of £10.136 million. Table 1 shows the pressures and savings and additional income, and Table 2 contains the overall budget summary. The increase in total dwelling rent income is based on an increase of 7.7%, which is CPI plus 1, on general needs properties, and an increase of 9.4%, which is RPI plus 0.5, for affordable housing. The average weekly social rent will increase by £7.92 from £102.88 to £110.81, and the average weekly rent for affordable housing will increase by £11.13 from £144.51 to £155.63. Table 3 shows how alternative scenarios for rent increases would have impacted the total rent income, and Table 4 shows the cumulative effect of these scenarios on the HRA business plan. Increases to sheltered housing service and utility charges will add an average of £18.02 per week to bills, which is a 37% rise. It is a lot, but it will enable us to recover expected costs and reduce the risk of the rent payers subsidising the sheltered housing schemes. And garage rents are also being increased. The reserves are shown in Table 5. After the deduction for the £10.136 million budget deficit, the reserves will total £6.468 million, and that includes the £1 million working balance general reserve. I just want to let you know of a minor correction to the paper. Paragraph 5.35 should say that the earmark reserves balance is £5.32 million, which equates to £1,511 per property. So those two numbers there need to be updated. The table is correct, but it's just that the paragraph was not updated. The HRA capital programme for 2024 to 25 to 2027 to 28 is shown in Table 6. The total proposed capital spend is £13.7 million for next year, which is substantially greater than the £8 million forecast in last year's budget. Both housing maintenance and the new build and acquisitions programme have increased spending proposed. The latter will deliver an additional 14 new homes to our stock. This is less than we've been able to do in recent years, but we are looking for further opportunities. Housing maintenance is now shown in detail in the table so that the provision for each type of work can be seen. The additional revenue contribution to capital that we are drawing from our strategic reserve will help with the affordability of the capital programme by reducing the cost of short-term borrowing. In summary, there are challenges with the HRA: regulator compliance, the condition of our stock and the cost of repairs and maintenance, the difficulty in building and acquiring new homes, not to mention the government's tinkering with rent policy. However, we are coping, and we are about to complete a comprehensive stock survey and a new business plan so we know what we have to do and how and when it will be done. As the report says, the journey to excellence will take several years to complete, but we are now seeing progress being made. And I'd like to propose the recommendations in paragraphs 4.1 to 4.8, which summarise the key budget proposals, and ask for a seconder. Councillor Carter, thank you. Members of the Cabinet, any questions? Councillor Derek Davis.
Sorry, I've just got the one about the £6 million repayment going to the Public Works Loan Board. Obviously, I know someone's done the figures and they've worked it out, but what would have been the interest rate if we had chosen that option?
This is a loan that we are repaying rather than continue with. Jenny, as person who's worked on the HRA budget. Are you able to provide any information on that?
I'm afraid I don't know how much it would be, because obviously we would be renewing it next year and it comes up for, it needs to be repaid next year, so we would have to take out another loan to repay that loan, as it were. How much the rates will be next year, I don't know, but given you have good reserves, it was a more prudent decision to pay it off with your reserves rather than taking the loan out again. I don't know if Alistair or Sue's, Karen would like to add anything to that.
Alistair, do you have anything?
So was the question around what would the interest rate be next year if we were to refinance that loan?
Yeah, pretty much. It's because obviously we're going through a very difficult time to repay a huge chunk, £6 million, this year. I know we would have to repay it at some point or refinance it. And I was just looking at the reason for not refinancing it and going for a straight repayment.
I mean, my understanding is that we have the funds set aside in reserves to repay that loan, and it would therefore be prudent to use those funds to repay the loan. I mean, I think that so. I think the interest, the annual interest on the loan is round about 170,000 per annum. Yeah? So therefore, by repaying that loan, we would save ourselves 170,000 per annum, less the interest that we earn on investing the 6 million that we've got set aside. But on balance, it is more prudent to repay the loan.
I think, Karen, you want to say something? No? Deborah?
Yes,
both of you want to say something? Okay, Karen first.
The proposed Treasury management strategy that will be going to Council alongside the budget report proposes that no long-term borrowing is undertaken in 24-25, given the high interest rates and given sort of current assumptions on interest rates falling from our advisor Sarling Close. So it would be prudent not to enter into a long-term loan that fixes the council on sort of what may be considered artificially high interest rates. But of course, it also says in the strategy that this will need to be reviewed for the next financial year, and also that we need to review it at the time when the loan is coming close, just to assure ourselves that the value for money for the council is being obtained by pursuing this course of action. And that would be it's regularly reviewed. Our lending, our loans, our borrowing needs are regularly reviewed during the year, and this will be part of a review as well.
Deborah, do you want to say anything as well?
Yes. Just to add that members may or may not be aware that the interest payable on our loans comes directly out of our revenue. So should we refinance, that would put significant pressure on our revenue and of course our ability to carry out repairs and maintenance going forward on our properties. Therefore, a further prudent reason to pay it off if we have the reserves to do so.
Thanks, Deborah. Councillor Saw.
Obviously, we've made a huge commitment and a totally proper commitment to improving our housing stock. And like many districts, we do have a homelessness problem. But looking forward, there may be some of our housing that is too expensive to repair, let's put it like this. Have we considered in this plan whether we are going to sell housing stock which is too expensive for us to keep within car stock.
Deborah, can you respond to that, please? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, and it is a very good question. So this year we'll be developing an asset register, and what that asset register will contain is a list of all our properties with all our previous spend, our predicted future spend, and from that we'll be able to do a calculation and understand which properties are costing the HRA a substantial amount of money because of it may be the bill type, etc. And from that we'll then be able to develop a strategy in terms of what properties we keep within the HRA and what properties we then may choose to sell. And of course we could then think about within that strategy, if we did sell properties, then to buy properties which are more energy efficient and cost efficient for our HRA business plan going forward.
Thank you, Deborah. Any other questions? In which case, Councillor Saul.
Sorry, Deborah, could you remind me how many people or families have we got on the homelessness register?
I'm not sure off the top of my head. Are you talking about in temporary accommodation
Yeah.
or on the housing? Right.
Yeah.
Let me get that figure off Emma, and I'll let you know.
Thank you.
Okay. Other councillors present, do you have any questions? Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Chair. Interesting enough, Councillor Saw has already touched on something that concerned me. We have got sort of reactive programmes to deal with tenants who actually cannot afford their increased rents and expenses. But my concern is about all those people that are outside what you would call the benefits catchment. What as a council are we, or what as a housing provider, are we going to support, how are we going to support these residents who don't fit into that and need advice and support as we, looking at the sheltered housing scheme charges, that is over £18 a week that these tenants are going to have to find. And I'm just concerned about those that are outside of the net, the safety net.
Thank you. I think I'll have to pass that one over to Deborah as well.
Thank you, and thank you for the question again. So there's a couple of things we'll be doing. Firstly, the schemes all have scheme managers, and they will be able to support the residents individually with any challenges they may have. The second thing we can do is utilise our AI, our Mobisoft software, which uses AI to predict when people are going to go into debt, so when they're struggling with their rent, and then we can use that data to get our income officers and also our financial inclusion officers, for which we have two, to work with those residents to help them budget. And the increases may well take some of our residents actually in to the realm where they can claim benefits. So it's quite an important piece of work that to take those steps.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Deborah.
Any other questions? In which case, moving on to Cabinet debate, does anyone wish to make any comment about the HRA budget at this stage? We're all happy with it? It's all fairly self-explanatory. I think in my introduction I covered off all of the key points, but if everyone's happy with the HRA budget, we'll move to the vote.
Thank you,
Move to the
Chair.
vote, please. Yeah.
That vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That is 5 votes for. That's unanimous.
That brings us on to the end of the meeting, and thank you, members of the Cabinet, for getting to this stage with both of those budget papers. We'll now move on to Council for final approval and adoption for those budgets. Probably be an interesting debate. There'll probably be quite a few questions which will need to be answered, but we'll have the final Council reports prepared very soon, ready for the meeting on the 20th of this month. In terms of next Cabinet meeting, the next Cabinet meeting is scheduled for Monday the 4th of March at 4 p.m. So now I'd like to draw the meeting to a close. Thank you, everyone.